In this video, we will focus on the autonomic ganglia, and I will concentrate in these two divisions, the sympathetic and parasympathetic. And if you want to know more about this, highly recommend you to go and read the textbook that they cover this in much more detail. So here, I'm going to be showing you diagrams from your textbook like this one. In these two cases, I cropped them and I will be showing you these two examples of sympathetic and parasympathetic ganglia. And so in previous videos, we have talked about these preganglionic, yeah, and postganglionic neurons. Same thing here in the sympathetic, preganglionic and postganglionic neurons. And here we are going to focus on this, on the ganglia here. And ganglia are group of nerves or brain cells that are closely related, and they can be divided in two. That they can be here sympathetic or parasympathetic. So in either one of those cases, what is happening is that the autonomic ganglia are sites at which information, and in this case, information is understood as action potential, arise from the central nervous system. So here you can see it coming from the brain stem. Here you can see it coming from the spinal cord. And later I will show you those diagrams. And they are transmitted to the peripheral nervous system. So either one, the same story is happening. So just to recap, I told you that autonomic ganglia are sites at which information, understood as action potential, uh, arise. Yeah, from where? From the central nervous system, and then they are transmitted to the peripheral nervous system. And how is that done? This is via synaptic neurotransmission. So later in the last section, I will talk about some neurotransmitters that do these kind of things. And as I told you, there are two major groups of autonomic ganglia that I told you in the beginning, that are the sympathetic and the parasympathetic. Now let's talk about this major division. The first one, that is the sympathetic one. And so in the following slides, I'm going to discuss about all the location and the different structures of the sympathetic ganglia. So first thing, in your textbook, they have this diagram that show you three main things. First, that there is a spinal cord. Second thing, as usually, you have all these preganglionic and postganglionic neurons. And third thing that it show you is that you will have the effectors. Yeah, that all this is because you send an action potential, preganglionic, synapses, postganglionic, and the information, it will finally reach an organ that it will produce different effects. In particular, now we're talking about ganglia. And a ganglia, if you remember, is a collection of cell bodies that come from, in this case, the postganglionic neuron. So everything starts here in the spinal cord. There will be an action potential that goes through the preganglionic neurons, and then they will reach the intersection between a preganglionic and a postganglionic. There will be a synapses in this area, yeah, and there will be this collection of cell bodies. In this case, you have, let's put A, the first major ganglia of the sympathetic is called sympathetic trunk ganglia. Yeah, and the second one here, let's put a B, is this one, the prevertebral ganglia. Now let's talk about each one of these two. So here, the sympathetic trunk ganglia, if you see, is located here. It lies lateral to the spinal cord, to the vertebral column, and not only in one side, but if we had more space, we will draw another trunk here that have all this ganglia there. In addition to that, we have the prevertebral ganglion, that in this case, it doesn't lie lateral, it lies anterior and is close to the large arteries that are located in the abdomen. So far, the key idea of this slide, I told you there are two main ganglia in the sympathetic division. So one, that is the one that lies lateral to spinal cord, and the other one that is the one that is anterior, that is the prevertebral ganglia. So remember, two major types, one that is the sympathetic trunk and the other one that is the prevertebral trunk. There are also, you will find in our books and even in your textbook, they said that other names can be for the sympathetic trunk ganglia, could be the vertebral chain ganglia or paravertebral ganglia. On the other hand, the prevertebral ganglia, an additional name, will be collateral ganglia. So I also told you that this sympathetic trunk ganglia lies in a vertical row on either side of the vertebral column. And in addition to that, in this schematic is not clear, but in the following I will show you that it extends from the skull and it goes to the most distal area or region of the spinal cord, that is the coccyx. So here we're still talking about the sympathetic autonomic ganglia. Here we're going to start studying the first group that you find in this sympathetic area. So let me show you what is the first group, but before that I remind you this is that diagram taken from your textbook. I just zoom in on the top because the first group is located in that region. So here you find, again, this is the same diagram, spinal cord. Here you find the brain. So you find all this central nervous system that is going to send preganglionic neurons that will attach to these postganglionic that are located here, and they will be seen innervating different regions, different organs. And here, of course, we have been talking that this is the trunk ganglia that we have been talking. That is not only located here, but if we were going to do this correct, there will be another one here. But just to simplify it, you will find that. Now, to continue talking about this, the specific of this first group, I have to tell you that here you find, again, these postganglionic neurons that will innervate the organs that are above the diaphragm. Okay, so this is where you find the lungs, the trachea here, the heart, and here in the head and in the neck you will find a lot of those. So those sympathetic trunk ganglia will innervate these specific organs that are located above the diaphragm, as I said. And in addition to that, they have very particular names related. All of them are cervical. Yes, so first one is the cervical, superior cervical ganglion. The second one will be the medial cervical ganglion, and the last one will be the inferior cervical ganglion. So just to remind you, the main goal or the main idea of this slide was to talk about the autonomic sympathetic ganglia, the first group that is located here on the top, of the sympathetic trunk ganglia, and there you will find that there will come there will be these preganglionic axons that will have here synapses with the sympathetic trunk ganglia, and from there you will have all these postganglionic axons, and those one will primarily innervate organs that are above the diaphragm, and we talk about all of this one, and in particular the ones that are located in the neck will have these very particular names that are very easy to remember, that are superior, middle, and inferior cervical ganglia. So again, this is the diagram that we have been talking. Here in the previous slide, we focus on the top part because here you have these three ganglia that have specific names. But however, if you see, in addition to those ones, here those ones are located in the cervical, close to the cervical region of the spinal cord. This one will be closer to the thoracic region, and this one don't have individual names. Another thing, so here this will innervate the specific organs too that are above the diaphragm. And in general, if you see the sympathetic ganglia, is these are really close to the spinal cord. As a result, the axons will be short. So all these axons will be short, while the postganglionic axons, as they have to go from the trunk ganglia to the organs, they will tend to be long axons. Okay, so just to remind you, we are still talking about the first group, about the postganglionic axons that come from the trunk, and I told you that those ones, this second section, don't have names, yeah, and they instead of being close to the cervical regions, they will be close to this thoracic area, but they don't have specific names. And it's this region that I just show you here. In addition to that, I told you that if you see the preganglionic neurons, they will tend to have short axons because they are close to the spinal cord, while the postganglionic ones, yeah, they will have very long axons because they have to innervate the organs that are far from the trunk ganglia. Now, in the following slide, I'm going to start talking about the second group, that are the ones that are located here. To finish this section of the autonomic sympathetic ganglia, we're going to finally talk about the second group. So while in the first group we're in the cervical region, on the top, here we're going to talk about this area. The second difference here of the second group is, do you remember the trunk ganglia? Here the ganglia is not going to be located there. These one are the prevertebral ganglia or collateral ganglia that are located here. Yeah, and you can see there are 5 major groups that I will show you the names in a second. And the most important is, if you remember, the diaphragm was very important because the first group innervate organs that are above the diaphragm. Here they innervate organs that are below the diaphragm, like the kidneys, the intestine, etc. Okay, so just to finish this section, just remember we are talking about not the first group anymore. We are talking about the second group of the sympathetic ganglia, and in this sympathetic ganglia, they are located not in the trunk ganglia anymore. They are located in the prevertebral or collateral ganglia that are anterior to the vertebral column, and they are close to the large arteries. And in general, these postganglionic arteries innervate organs that are below the diaphragm, and there are 5 major prevertebral ganglia. So here you find, let's put a number, celiac here, the superior mesenteric here, the inferior mesenteric will be this one, here the 4th one, they are aorticorenal, and finally this one that I think this one will be the renal. Okay, so with this we finish the sympathetic ganglia. Now we're going to move into the parasympathetic ganglia. So now let's talk about the parasympathetic ganglia, and let's start making some comparisons. So here you see this is the diagram of your textbook, and although there is a lot of information here, so for that reason we are going to focus only on the top region. I wanted to show you something here. If you see, this is called cranial sacral. Yeah, so this is the parasympathetic division. So here it means that the nerves will come from the brain and come from the sacral region. Yeah, that is very different from the sympathetic. If you remember, the sympathetic, they used to come from this thoracic and lumbar. Yeah, so this is one of the first difference with the with the sympathetic. Now, one thing that you should be already used to it when we talk about the preganglionic. So here you see the preganglionic neurons. So they go again brainstem. So they will the preganglionic will send an action potential, and this action potential will go synapse and send a signal to the organs. Second difference, here you see that there is no trunk ganglia or prevertebral ganglia. Here we have this terminal ganglia. That is this collection of ganglia, and this terminal ganglia is intramural. Yeah, it's very close to the organs that are going to innervate. It will be within the walls or close to the walls. In other words, here, in addition to be cranial and sacral, the first difference, instead of thoracal lumbar, yeah, the nerves will come from different regions. The second thing, we'll have trunk ganglia, where we're going to have is a terminal ganglia, and this trunk ganglia is going to be close to the organs. It will be intramural. And the third difference is that as it's intramural, this will be the axons here, they will be short. Yeah, this one will be short, while the preganglionic ones will be long. Yeah, because they are far from the spinal cord, or in this case from the brainstem. Okay, just to finish, here in the terminal ganglia you have individual names too. So here, this is the last difference. So here, for example, this one is called ciliary gland. The second one here, that has a long name, that is the pterygopalatine ganglion. And here the submandibular ganglion. Okay, so just to summarize, I told you that it's very important that you remember that there is preganglionic and postganglionic neurons, but independent of this similarity, there is a lot of difference. So these preganglionic neurons will synapse in with postganglionic neurons. However, here you see that the ganglions are not in the trunk, they are intramural. In other words, they are very close within the walls of the organs that they are going to innervate. So the ganglia is going to be located far from the spinal cord. And here, this is what I just told you. So we will be within the walls of the visceral organs. And I also told you that the specific names are different. So here you have, for example, the ciliary ganglion, this one that is very long, and the submandibular ganglion, this one, you will see it in your textbook. Here it will be this one. That is to the diagram, is too big to put it here. Okay, so we just finished with the cranial part of the parasympathetic division. Now let's move into the part below, into this area, into the sacral region. To finish this section of the parasympathetic ganglia, we already talked about the cranial area. Now we're moving to the sacral area, and I magnified that region to see it more clearly. And here you can see again some in the sacral area, so preganglionic and postganglionic neurons. Here, if you see these remaining ganglia don't have a specific names. Yeah, so however, you still have the preganglionic neurons, and you have the postganglionic neurons. It's more difficult here in this diagram to make this differentiation, but the idea is very clear. Here, the axons, if you remember, they will be short, as we described, and here they will be much longer. So remember, there is not a specific names. I already told you about the location of the ganglia. They will be close to the organs. And remember, the preganglionic axons will be long, while their postganglionic axons will be short. Okay, with this, we finish this section. Now we're going to move into the postganglionic neurons. So to finish, we're going to talk a little bit about the postganglionic neurons. So we're going to tell you that we know that from the central nervous system, these sympathetic preganglionic neurons are going to reach this trunk ganglia, and here this will be a mess. Yeah, or a mess and a maze. Why? Because there are so many paths there. So to reach this last step, that is the postganglionic neurons, your textbook, it will show you that these axons may connect in so many different ways. And to that, it was going to show you this diagram. Each one of these numbers represent a different way in which this path can take place. So for example, the first one show you that is not the preganglionic neurons, the axons are not going to look for a specific ganglion. Yeah, they will synapse with the postganglionic neurons of in a ganglion that is not specific. Is the opposite is the first that it reaches. So I just told you that the impulse is traveling, and when it reaches the trunk, it's not going to look for a specific ganglion. It's going to look for the first one that it reaches. Now the second thing that it could happen is it may descend or may ascend. This is where you find twice this step here. Yeah, it can go look for higher or look for lower ganglia before synapsing with the postganglionic neurons. So far I have told you that the preganglionic neurons, they are not looking for an specific ganglion. They just synapse with the first one that they find. I told you they don't have to take a specific direction. They can be ascending or they can be descending. Now, what I want to show you, the third step, is that these preganglionic neurons, they can pass up, as you can see here, the trunk ganglia, or they can pass down the trunk ganglia to go from one ganglia to the other one. In the three previous examples, I was talking about the importance of these trunk ganglia. Another thing that could happen is that it can go through all this path of the trunk ganglia, all the axon is going and doing all these things without synapsing until reaching here. Now, this prevertebral ganglia. And there it can synapse. Now we're going to talk about the fifth path. And in the fifth path, we're going to go through the trunk ganglia, and we're going to go through the prevertebral ganglion, so to those two, and there will not be synapses. So it will not go to any specific, it will not go ascending or descending, it will not go pass up or pass down, it will not go to the prevertebral ganglion. What it's going to find is these chromaffin cells that are located in the suprarenal glands, and those chromaffin cells are functional similar to the sympathetic postganglion neurons, and there is where the synapses is going to occur. Now we are going to finish this section of the postganglionic neurons. The idea was to show you that rather than have a connection between a preganglionic and a postganglionic, and this is so simple, what I have been showing you is that it's more complicated and there are many paths. Now I'm going to show you, for example, that both in the preganglionic neurons, things that are complicated, be more complicated, the connections, and the postganglionic neurons, things can also be more complicated. So let's start with the first one. So rather than thinking that we have one single neuron that have a single branch, these axons can have many branches. Yeah, many collateral axons that can be interacting. So this connection one-to-one that we were showing in the diagrams is not always the case. In the previous lecture, this can be more complicated. So remember, a single sympathetic preganglionic fiber has many axons, collaterals, or branches, as I show you in this diagram. In addition, now I'm going to talk about the postganglionic neurons. And here you can see that from one here, you can have multiple fibers going to different regions of the body. Yeah. And these patterns of projection, this divergence of connectivity could explain why sympathetic responses can affect simultaneously the entire body at the same time. So something that when you send a signal, you can affect different parts of your body. Okay, so just to conclude, remember, with the postganglionic neuron, you also can find more complicated patterns. Yeah, instead of being one-to-one, as I showed you in the beginning of the lecture, you can synapse with 20 or more postganglionic neurons, and that the pattern of projection is an example of divergence, so as I show you here. And finally, this can help to explain why the sympathetic responses don't take place in a single local part, but it can happen simultaneously in the entire body. And with this section, we finish this lecture about the autonomic nervous system. We are going to talk about a last section about neurotransmitters and the type of neurotransmitters that are affecting the autonomic nervous system. And if you have any questions, just let me know.